Kind of hyper alert because of property things that had happened the day before. So we were listening for noise. Everything was kind of quiet.
Just this kind of shrill, almost animalistic scream.
Imagine sitting in your home, the evening unfolding like any other. The hum of the television fills the background. Maybe the faint rustle of the wind pushes against the trees outside. And then, cutting through the ordinary rhythm of life, you hear it. A scream. Not just any scream, but one so sharp, so high-pitched, it feels unnatural. It slices through the air like glass shattering. For a moment, you stop breathing. Your body freezes. Your mind races. What could it be? An animal? A child at play? But there's something about it, something so chilling, so different, that instinct tells you this isn't normal. This isn't play. This is fear. The neighbor later described that sound as unforgettable, a sound that still lingers in her memory like an echo she can't silence. It wasn't the type of noise you dismiss. It was a kind of sound that forces you to turn your head, to strain your ears, to wonder if you should run outside or pick up the phone. And then, hours later, the pieces began to fall into place in the most haunting way possible. That same evening, news spread across Ben Hill Road. 5-year-old Summer Wells was gone. Missing. Vanished without a trace from her family's property. The playful, blonde-haired little girl who neighbors often saw outside had simply disappeared. For the woman who heard the scream, the realization hit like a punch to the chest. Could what she heard have been connected? Could that chilling cry have been Summer in her final moments of freedom before she was taken? The thought alone was unbearable. That scream was no longer just another moment in the evening. It became a possible clue, a haunting reminder of the last sound Summer may have made before vanishing forever. The neighbor's account has fueled speculation ever since. Was it truly Summer's voice? Was she calling for help? Or could it have been something else entirely? Something unrelated, a coincidence on the worst possible day? To this day, that scream remains one of the most haunting and debated details surrounding the disappearance of Summer Wells. The neighbor describes it as a shrill, almost animalistic scream, a sound that cut through the stillness of the hollow in a way she had never experienced before. It wasn't laughter. It wasn't the ordinary cries of children at play. It was raw, piercing, and unnatural, something that immediately unsettled her gut. To this day, she insists the sound wasn't just strange. It was terrifying. It was a kind of sound that makes the hair on your arm stand on end, the kind that tells you instinctively that something is very, very wrong. And then came the revelation that made her account all the more chilling. When search teams swarmed the property and surrounding woods in the desperate hours after Summer was reported missing, highly trained K-9 units were brought in. These dogs, specially trained to track humans sent over miles, immediately locked onto Summer's trail. They followed her scent from the house, across parts of the yard, down toward the rough, overgrown paths that lead away from the Wells home. For a brief moment, there was hope. The dogs seemed to be closing in on a direction, a clue, a lead that could unravel the mystery. But then, the trail ended. At the edge of a narrow road near the property, the K-9 suddenly lost her scent. It was as if Summer had simply vanished into thin air at that exact spot. Search experts explained that this kind of break often suggests one thing: the missing person was picked up and carried away, possibly loaded into a vehicle. And with that, the horrifying possibility began to take shape, that Summer Wells hadn't simply wandered off into the woods, but had been taken. For many in the community, this detail reshaped everything they thought they knew about the case. A scream unlike anything the neighbor had heard before, followed by the abrupt disappearance of a scent trail. Together, they painted a disturbing picture. If Summer was indeed abducted, that scream might have been the moment it happened. The idea that a car could have been waiting just yards away from her home, hidden in plain sight on the rural road, chills people to this day. Summer Wells was just 5 years old when she vanished without a trace, a bright-eyed little girl whose smile lit up her family's rural property in Rogersville, Tennessee. On June 15, 2021, her mother called 911 to report her missing, setting in motion one of the most urgent and far-reaching searches the state had ever seen. Within hours, Hawkins County Sheriff's deputies, volunteers, and neighbors were combing the thick brush and steep hillside surrounding the Wells home on Ben Hill Road. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every minute that passed without answers felt heavier, more dangerous, more final. This wasn't just a routine search. What unfolded in those first days became the largest manhunt in Tennessee history. Helicopters thundered overhead, their searchlights piercing through the tree canopy. Dive teams plunged into murky ponds and waterways, hoping to uncover a clue beneath the surface. Drones hovered above the rugged landscape, mapping out areas that were nearly impossible to reach on foot. On the ground, hundreds of trained search and rescue personnel moved shoulder to shoulder, guided by maps, GPS trackers, and sheer determination to find a trace of the missing girl. The terrain itself was an enemy. The Appalachian foothills surrounding the Wells property are unforgiving. Dense woods, steep drop-offs, twisting trails that lead to nowhere. Searchers described it as one of the toughest landscapes they had ever encountered, the kind of place where a single step in the wrong direction can leave you disoriented and lost. The hope was that Summer had simply wandered off, and that she would be found curled up under a tree or hiding in a thicket. But as hours turned to days, that hope began to fade. Authorities exhausted every angle. Bloodhounds and cadaver dogs were cycled through. Crews searched caves, old barns, even abandoned wells. Neighbors opened their properties, vehicles, and outbuildings to investigators. The search radius grew wider and wider. And yet, nothing. Not a single piece of clothing, not a shoe, not even a footprint. Summer Wells had vanished as though the earth had swallowed her whole. For the community, the lack of evidence was devastating. Families clung to update from law enforcement, holding vigils, praying that she would be brought home safely. But as the weeks stretched into months, the grim reality began to settle in. Despite the largest search in Tennessee's history, not one trace of little Summer has ever been found. One of the most chilling accounts tied to Summer Wells' disappearance comes from neighbor Jodasue Brown, a woman who lived just down the hollow from the Wells family. She remembers it vividly. She was inside her home with her children that evening, when the ordinary calm of the day was shattered by a sound so sudden and so unsettling that it made her stop in her tracks. A scream, not a playful shout, not the noise of kids running around outside, but something sharper, piercing, high-pitched, and then cut off by silence. In her words, it wasn't the kind of sound you could mistake for anything ordinary. It was a kind of noise that jolts your nerves and leaves you wondering whether you just witnessed something life-altering without even realizing it in the moment. As she processed what she'd just heard, Jodasue noticed something else that burned itself into her memory. Out of the quiet came the sound of tires crunching gravel. A car pulled up toward the Wells driveway, its movements deliberate, almost too timed with the scream she had just heard. Then, just as suddenly, a door slammed. The echo carried through the hollow, and then nothing. The car disappeared, the sound faded, and the night closed back in on itself as though nothing had happened. At the time, she didn't yet know that Summer Wells was missing. The scream, the vehicle, the slamming door. These details didn't connect until later, when word spread through the community that the little girl from the Wells home had vanished. That's when the weight of what she had experienced struck her. Had she heard Summer's final cry for help? Had she witnessed, in sound if not in sight, the exact moment the 5-year-old was abducted? This single testimony has fueled years of speculation, igniting heated debates among locals, investigators, and online communities alike. If Jodasue's memory is accurate, it could mean that Summer wasn't simply lost in the woods or hiding somewhere close by. It could mean she was taken, snatched in the briefest of windows, forced into a waiting car, while no one else was watching. The questions that spring from this are haunting. Was the scream the moment of abduction? Did the slamming car door seal her fate? Or, as some skeptics suggest, could the scream and the car have been entirely unrelated? Two coincidental moments tragically overlapping with the night a child disappeared? The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, has remained cautious from the very beginning. Despite the whispers, despite the theories that spread like wildfire both online and in the hollows of Hawkins County, they have never once officially confirmed that an abduction took place. Investigators have repeatedly urged the public to be careful, to avoid jumping to conclusions, and to resist spreading rumors or misinformation that could cloud the facts of the case. Their stance has always been rooted in evidence, or rather, the lack of it. Without clear proof of foul play, they've held back from declaring Summer Wells a victim of abduction. But while officials have maintained their careful position, the people closest to the case have not been so easily convinced. To many in the Rogersville community, the account of that piercing scream, paired with the disappearance of Summer's scent at the roadside, feels less like rumor and more like the missing puzzle piece. It's a piece that changes the entire picture. Instead of a child who simply wandered off into the woods, it paints the possibility of something far darker, that Summer was taken, lifted from her own property, and driven away before anyone had the chance to stop it. For locals who have lived in those hills all their lives, the idea that a little girl could vanish into the vast woods without leaving behind a single trace feels unlikely. The searchers scoured every inch of land, every creek bed, every hollow. Not a shoe, not a shred of clothing, not a footprint was ever discovered. And so the community asked itself, if she didn't wander off, then where did she go? The answer many circle back to is unnerving. A car, a stranger, or perhaps someone she knew. If that's true, then the scream reported by the neighbor takes on a horrifying new meaning. It wasn't just a fleeting sound in the background of a summer evening. It wasn't just noise carried on the wind. It was desperation, panic, a cry for help, a cry that might have been the very last sound anyone would ever hear from Little Summerwells. That one detail, whether confirmed or not, continues to haunt everyone who has followed this case from the start. Years have passed since that June evening, yet the mystery of Summerwells remains as heavy as ever. Her case is still unsolved, her photograph still taped to storefront windows, pinned to community boards, and printed on the flyers that curl at the edges from rain and sun. Her wide, curious eyes and blonde hair stare back at passers-by, a constant reminder of a little girl who never came home. In small Tennessee towns, her name is still spoken in hushed tones, at church gatherings, in grocery store aisles, at local diners where conversations drift back to the question that never goes away. What really happened to Summer? The silence of the case is deafening. No arrests, no conclusive answers, no closure for a family or community still haunted by her absence. Yet one detail refuses to fade, the neighbor's haunting account. A scream that tore through the stillness of the evening. The sound of a car pulling up, a door slamming shut, and then nothing. Just silence. That sequence of moments continues to replay in the minds of many, like an echo looping endlessly through the hollow. For some, it feels like the most important clue that has ever surfaced, a sliver of truth buried in uncertainty. They believe that scream was not random, not coincidental, but the very moment Summer was taken from her home. For others, doubt creeps in. Could it have been a different noise entirely? Could the car have been unrelated? In the absence of solid evidence, the questions keep circling back, refusing to be laid to rest. And so we are left standing in the same place as the very beginning, with fragments of a story but no resolution. A scream, a car, silence. Were those the final moments of a little girl vanishing forever? Or could they be the overlooked pieces of a puzzle, clues that, if revisited with fresh eyes, might one day unlock the truth and lead her home? Until that answer comes, the echo of that night will never fade. It lingers in the community, in the case files, and in the hearts of all who refuse to stop searching for Summerwells.